The transport window in Pro Tools is much like the playback and transport controls on a tape machine. You can view it in the Edit Window toolbar, and we can do this with the pop-up menu, or by right-clicking and selecting Transport, and this gives us a transport right in the toolbar, or you can select Transport from the Window menu in Pro Tools. You can also use the key command Command on a Mac or Control in Windows, and the number 1 on the numeric keypad. You can see that the number 1 is on the numeric keypad in Pro Tools because of the box around the number. The transport window is a floating window, so it floats above other windows that are open, obscuring your view of whatever's beneath it. Right now we're looking at the most compact layout of the transport window. It has all of our essential tools for controlling transport. We have a synchronization button, which we won't use in this course, but if you were going to use it, it would allow you to synchronize Pro Tools with other pieces of hardware or other DAWs. We have a return to zero or return to start, rewind, fast forward, and go to end button. And we have stop, play, and record enable. To the right of the record enable button is the record enable status LED and the input status LED. If any of your tracks are record enabled, the record enable status LED will light up. Here we have our pre-roll value and our post-roll value and a fade-in value. Pre-roll essentially means that when you set the pre-roll value, Pro Tools will actually start playing back that much before the cursor. So right now we can see that our pre-roll is set to 2 bars and 0 beats. So if we enable pre-roll, Pro Tools will not start at the cursor location, but instead will start playback 2 bars earlier. Likewise, post-roll is the amount of time after the playback selection that Pro Tools will keep playing. You can set these values by just clicking and entering whatever value you like. I'm going to turn off pre-roll. And the fade-in value is a new thing in Pro Tools that's pretty useful. You can set a short amount of time with fade-in enabled to include a fade of that set duration in the recorded audio. Now, you may not want that if you're recording, but it can be useful in certain situations. Let's take a listen to what it would sound like. Make it a little bit longer, and we can go ahead and press play. So you can hear that there's a bit of a fade-in on that first piano note, and if we turn it off, we won't hear that anymore. Over here, we have our start, end, and length. The start is the cursor's start location or the selection start location. The end is the end location from a selection, and the length is the duration or the length of the selection. You can also right-click to enable more options for playback and record, and we'll look at these in more depth later in this course. On the top right-hand corner of the transport window, we have a little pop-up menu, and here we can add other elements to our transport, or we can even choose all to show everything. When we show all, we can also see the main counter selector, the sub-counter, our count-off and MIDI options, as well as certain other MIDI options that we'll look at later in this course, and our output meter path. Another thing I want to point out is the big counter. We can open this from the window menu by selecting big counter or using the key command Command and 3 on the numeric keypad on a Mac, or Control and 3 on the numeric keypad in Windows. The big counter is a floating window like the transport window, and is really useful for watching the time from a distance and for finding sync points. In post-production, it's primarily used for watching timecode. From the pop-up menu on the right, we can choose our time scale. We have bars and beats, minutes and seconds, timecode, feet and frames, and samples. So you'll want to choose the appropriate time scale for the project on which you're working. One other thing to point out is that you can set an alternate or sub-time scale. We can do that by going up to the main counter selector and choosing Show Subcounter. When we choose Show Subcounter, we can now see the subcounter in the main counter window. We can also change the big counter to mirror this if we want to. But notice that when we change the timescale on the big counter, that becomes the main timescale. The big counter and the transport window both have their uses, but I usually just view the transport controls that reside in the top of the Edit Window toolbar for easy access, and I'll use the key commands instead of clicking with the mouse when I want to open the actual transport window or big counter as floating windows.